Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to Repro Action's Act and Learn webinar for the month of February 2023. We're very excited to discuss this important topic with you today. It is abortion pills are coming to pharmacies, and couldn't be more excited about some positive developments about abortion pills. And we'll also discuss threats that are facing access to abortion pills right now. So first we'll introduce your co-host. The first voice you're hearing is Erin Matson. The photograph on the left, I use she, her pronouns. I'm co-founder and executive director of Repro Action. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and you can follow me on Twitter at Erin to the Max, and I'll pass it over to my co-host to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Hernandez. I use she, ella pronouns. My position is Senior Outreach Coordinator for Repro Action. I am based in South Texas, and you can follow me on Twitter at Applejack_10.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacqueline. So our agenda today, first we'll introduce Repro Action, then Jackie will talk about pharmacies dispensing medication, abortion, and actions you can take. After that, we'll move into our panel discussion. We are so excited to have two incredibly high caliber panelists joining us today to break this all down. First, we'll have a discussion with Meg Sasse-Stern with the organization Just the Pill. And then we're also incredibly excited to be joined by Ushma Upadhyay, who is with the University of California, San Francisco and ANSIRH. So really excited to have those two panelists. Then we'll talk about next steps and have Q&A. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. If you have questions at any point along the way, if you have questions for Meg, if you have questions for Ushma, if you have questions for Jacqueline or myself, or they're not directed toward a specific person, but you just have questions, you don't have to wait until the end Q&A to put them in. Just put them into the questions tab and we'll get to as many as possible at the end. And then if you are on Twitter and live tweeting is your jam, we invite you to join the conversation over there, and just please put the hashtag ReproAction on it if you're tweeting along, and that makes it easier for us to amplify it from our accounts as well as for others to see the full conversation. So thanks for that. Okay, a very brief overview of Repro Action. Repro Action is an organization leading bold action to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We're deeply proud of our left flank analysis, and we're known for our willingness to hold folks on all sides of the issues accountable, whether they're traditionally considered allies or opposition. In other words, we hold big pro-life brutally accountable, and we also will not hesitate to hold someone accountable, even if they're saying, but I'm pro-choice, and they're standing in the way of increasing access to abortion or advancing reproductive justice. And we have a deep commitment to nonviolent direct action as one of the tools in our toolbox. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Jacqueline to talk a bit about the importance of abortion pill access and some actions you can take right now.
Hello, everyone, again. The voice you're hearing is Jackie's. I'm going to talk about the importance of abortion pill access. So now more than ever, people need access to abortion care and the information on how to get their care. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has expanded access to medication abortion in January 2023. Prior to this expansion, medication abortion needed to be picked up in person at physicians' offices who met tight, unnecessary restrictions for dispensing the medication. Now, people needing abortion care will be able to get it through participating pharmacies, including through the mail and at stores. Medication abortion prescribed by a provider contains two medications: mifepristone, which is the first round and stops production of progesterone. And then you have misoprostol, which is the second round and causes cramping and bleeding. While an upcoming federal court case out of Texas threatens access to mifepristone, which would have devastating consequences, we want to affirm that abortion with pills is safe and essential healthcare. You'll hear more about on that case in the panel discussion. We have additional resources from Repro Action on medication abortion, which I will go ahead and send in the chat, which are 2 fact sheets. The first fact sheet is facts about misoprostol for self-managed abortion, and the other fact sheet is facts about mifepristone and misoprostol for self-managed abortion. So on this slide, we have pledges by CVS, Walgreens, and Rite Aid. So CVS and Walgreens have vowed to offer mifepristone with a prescription. And Rite Aid has stated that they are planning to offer mifepristone in some of their pharmacies. So this means that local pharmacies could have abortion pills for your convenience, and this would make them more accessible to our communities. The importance of these pharmacy chains pledging their support for medication abortion is super vital for the inclusion and normalization of abortion care. These graphics are on our social medias, and you could go ahead and share them and show your support to them. So, how to take action? A direct action that will be most impactful is using your voice. You can call, tweet, tag your local CVS and Walgreens, and please urge them to stock up on abortion pills. You can also tell Rite Aid that they need to make sure that all of their pharmacies have mifepristone available, and not just the select ones. You can also sign our petition, which was featured in Ms. Magazine. You can also share the following graphics. Accessing medication abortion at your local pharmacy could be a game changer for so many communities. Some of the graphics state CVS and Walgreens have already pledged to offer abortion pills in their stores. You can let them know you're thrilled with this decision. Another graphic says, stock abortion pills in your stores now. And the last one says, I want pharmacy service providers to swiftly stock abortion pills at their stores and to ensure customers have reliable access whenever they need it. Abortion with pills is safe, effective, and everyone deserves access to these necessary medications. Other graphics say, I want abortion pills stocked at my local pharmacy and all pharmacies nationwide. Abortion with pills is safe and effective, and everyone deserves access to these necessary medications. And the action graphic says, 1, sign the petition. 2, share these graphics on social media. 3, tag CVS and Walgreens. And 4, thank them personally. So now I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker for today, who is Meg Sasse, uses she, her pronouns, and is the outreach coordinator for Just the Pill. Meg is the outreach and operations coordinator at Just the Pill, a nonprofit telehealth abortion provider, offering virtual and mobile clinic visits in Colorado, Minnesota, Montana, and Wyoming. Just the Pill sees patients from over 30 states, and last year, their mobile clinics provided no-cost abortions to over 150 traveling Texans, which is absolutely amazing. Meg has been on the front lines of abortion access in Kentucky for 20 plus years. She also co-founded one of the first practical support abortion funds and has expertise in creating safer pathways to abortion access. Meg is also a network weaver with experience in cross-movement collaboration. When she is not engaged in direct action as community care, Meg enjoys travel, rest, and quality time with good people. Thank you so much for joining us, Meg. I appreciate your expertise on this topic, and I will go ahead and start with the first question. When someone is prescribed abortion pills by a clinician through a service like Just the Pill, what can they expect?
Thank you so much. Our virtual clinic patients have a very different experience than the mobile clinic patients, but there are a number of things that are the same for both processes. Everyone goes through a thorough screening, including health history, to make sure that they are a good candidate for medication abortion. Everybody is offered financial assistance as well as support if they need to travel to one of the 4 states where we provide care. And every patient has a one-on-one appointment with one of our clinicians. Their medication will arrive either through the mail from one of the mail order pharmacies that we work with, or for mobile clinic patients, the medicine is dispensed out of our mobile unit. And then we do have a robust follow-up program. So again, whether it is a virtual clinic or a mobile clinic patient, our clinical staff maintains contact and goes through our follow-up procedures with every patient, including potentially covering any follow-up abortion care that might be needed in the rare event that the medicines do not work. So yeah, that's what most folks can expect, and we by and large are excited to be accompanying people despite some really intense barriers that they're facing just to access care as it stands right now.
Thank you so much, Meg. I appreciate all the work you and Just a Pill contributes to the abortion movement. So I'm very grateful to have you here on this panel and to thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Another question that I have for you is, how could having abortion pills available in their own neighborhood pharmacies impact people in marginalized and in low access areas?
This is such a great question, and I agree that if abortion pills were truly available in our communities, the impacts would be incredible. But as it stands, the path to real access remains heavily obstructed, particularly for those folks that are in marginalized and low access areas. You know, big name pharmacies barely had time to say, yes, we will stock these medicines before we saw additional restrictions headed our way, which I know we will kind of hear more about later, the current challenge that mifepristone is facing. But again, you know, even if the neighborhood pharmacy does have mifepristone in stock, there are still major privacy issues for people that are trying to access pills at kind of their neighborhood pharmacy, which I can talk a little bit more about in a moment.
Yeah, the barriers I feel like that people are facing right now are just incredibly suppressive. And as we'll get to the Texas case in a bit, I would agree with you that having access to this would greatly increase equity for marginalized and low-income areas. Another question that I have for you would be, what do you think the biggest challenge will be for people to access abortion pills in their local pharmacies? And what do you want pharmacy service providers like CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens do to ensure people can get these necessary medications?
Yeah, it's such an important sort of angle to look from. And again, we mentioned, you know, having these pharmacies stock the medicines is great in theory, but what about the stigma that remains in our communities, including, you know, true story, growing up, my pharmacist was my great uncle, and I'm in a city in Kentucky. So, you know, I think about people that are in communities where pharmacists refuse to dispense Plan B and morning after pills or other forms of birth control, and how many communities will still see those experiences where, again, even if the medicine is in stock, will the pharmacist willingly dispense it? And then kind of the next piece of that for folks in smaller communities is, yes, HIPAA exists, and also people just know your business, especially if you are going to the Walgreens that is the only one in your downtown area, for example. So I do think that, we will continue to see challenges as long as we see stigma. So shout out to Repro Action for your work to destigmatize abortion through mobilizing communities. And I think that if big name pharmacies are serious about making these, we know these are safe medications, and if they're serious about making them accessible, I think that these pharmacies can do a lot more to leverage their power in the industry and demand a permanent end to the restrictions on mifepristone, while also lobbying to allow abortion pills to be available over the counter. We know that these medicines are safer than Tylenol and far safer than pregnancy and childbirth. And these ongoing restrictions are just additional kind of moves in the playbook to keep us on the defense and having to drain our resources, as well as deal with the emotional whiplash and sometimes actual grief of losing access to our bodily autonomy. So I think that there's a lot more that the pharmacies could do.
Thank you so much for that answer, Meg. And I just want to say that I feel that same emotion, right? That these big pharmacy chains can do more. This is a right step in the right direction, but definitely there is a lot of work to be done. And us showcasing support to them maybe could make them feel like they have community support as well, and it's not just the antis that don't want abortion pills in their pharmacies, but to show community support and community strength as well, that we are deserving of abortion care and abortion health services. So I completely agree with you on that sentiment. So thank you so much for being here and for showing us your expertise on these topics.
Yes, thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you so much to both Meg and Jacqueline, and I'm very pleased to introduce Ushma Upadhyay, who uses she, her pronouns, and that's Dr. Ushma Upadhyay. Ushma is a professor at the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences, and is co-director at Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health. And Ushma is a total rock star, and I'm very honored that she's joining us on our webinar today. She's a public health social scientist trained in epidemiology and demography. She's a professor at the University of California, San Francisco, and faculty at ANSIRH. Her expertise is in abortion safety and access in the U.S., state-level abortion restrictions, and medication abortions. She's the principal investigator of the California Home Abortion by Telehealth study, which evaluates the safety, effectiveness, and acceptability of telehealth for abortion. She's also leading a trial on interest in the late period pill using misoprostol alone. So, Ushma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with Repro Action.
Oh, we are so thrilled to have you. Again, like rock star. I just have to fawn over you. So your research is just changing the world. So first we'll go with, you released the findings of the We Count research study back in late October, which showed that there were about 10,000 fewer in-clinic abortions that have taken place since a stacked Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last June. So like, let's take a step back for a moment. What does this all mean? If we have abortion pills in pharmacies, ostensibly like making abortion pills uh, easier to access, which should have happened a long time ago, and there's still more we could do, of course. What does that mean in this current landscape where it's so much harder to access abortion because of the hateful Supreme Court decision?
Yeah, well, in our we count study, we know, yes, there were 10,000 fewer abortion or people who were able to get an abortion. But we also saw that there were 6 states that saw huge surges in demand. And these are states that are in the middle of the country that had some restrictions, but didn't all out ban abortion. And 2 of those are states that just the pill works in, Colorado and Montana, as well as Nebraska, Kansas, Illinois, and North Carolina. And I heard from providers in these states that say that they have to triage patients. They just can't, they don't have the capacity to serve all of the patients that are coming in. And they're actually saying, well, don't make the long journey yet. Wait a couple weeks and I can get you in 2 weeks since you're only at 6 weeks of pregnancy. You have a little bit of time. And that is just gut wrenching, because when people want an abortion, we know from research that people want it as soon as they can get it. Once they decide, they want it right away. And that's, patient-centered care. So I'm hoping that, pharmacies, availability of medication abortion at pharmacies can help ease those surges once they do eventually get to the pharmacies. And I loved what Jacqueline said earlier about normalization, that, it shouldn't be that you have to wait 2 weeks to get your appointment. You should just be able to go to, even if it is in another state, just go to a pharmacy and pick up your medication.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's mind numbing. And we'll talk about that more with the next question, but it's mind numbing that abortion pills haven't been available in pharmacies all along, because the medication is so safe and so effective. And there's this tremendous track record of it working. And so, there must be something going on. So to that point, let's go to my next question for you. So you recently had an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times, and congratulations for that. And you argued that the Food and Drug Administration should have done more to expand medication abortion access. And co-sign and hard agree. So can you just walk us down kind of the history of restrictions on abortion pills and the restrictions that have been there and why they're unnecessary, and also restrictions that continue to exist to this moment that are unnecessary and serving as a barrier to care?
Sure. So as Jacqueline presented earlier, the mifepristone has a special set of rules called the REMS. And these REMS were in place since the early 2000s, and they include 3 provisions. The first one was that providers had to have a special certification to be able to prescribe abortion pills. Number 2, they had to sign and have patients sign a patient agreement form. So this is a form that basically lists out all of the risks of this incredibly safe medication. So it's just to remind patients that, hey, I'm prescribing you this medication and you're taking on these risks, and so you need to sign this form. And then the third requirement was that it had to be dispensed only in a clinic, doctor's office, or hospital. So, in December 2021, the FDA made a grand announcement that they were removing that third restriction, removing the in-person dispensing restriction, and everyone celebrated, yay! Then they said we'll announce the process. And then it took them over a year, and they finally announced it this past January, which, people were celebrating, but, somebody said these are crumbs that we're getting. It's really ridiculous how with every small release of a restriction, we're expected to celebrate when none of these restrictions should be there in the first place. So the other 2, and the other thing is by announcing this, they added a new restriction that pharmacies have to have a special certification to be able to dispense these medications. And so that's actually why it's taking so long. That's why we have pledges from these pharmacies and not, hey, we're stocking it now, because these pharmacies have to get certified. And what that means is they have to set up special systems to ensure that they can track that the providers have that special certification, and that that the provider has asked the patient to sign this extra form. So none of this, like, it's so complicated, it's even hard to talk about it with you today. And none of this is required for any other normal prescription, Viagra, any other prescription. So it just doesn't make any sense that they're kind of twisting themselves in knots to retain these restrictions that are not based in any evidence that they're needed. And then one last restriction, or one last thing that the FDA really could have done, or should have done. Last fall, ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, sent a citizen's petition to the FDA asking them to add the indication for miscarriage management for mifepristone, and the FDA denied that request. And had the FDA just simply approved that request, we could be seeing mifepristone in states that ban abortion to help people who are experiencing miscarriage. And that really would have gone a long way to normalizing mifepristone, having patients expect to be able to get it from their local pharmacy. And it probably would have moved things along a lot faster if pharmacies knew they had that additional client base customer base to sell these pills to.
Oh, it is hard for me. I mean, I've just been sitting here shaking my head and in anger and frustration as you describe and lay out just a long track history or track record of the Food and Drug Administration just throwing up unnecessary barriers to care that people need. I mean, just a reminder for our listeners that, and it may be new information for you as well, that abortion pills are safer than Tylenol. And Tylenol is something that can just be purchased off the shelf. But meanwhile, the FDA continues to contort itself around creating really, there's no other way I can refer to, like a hall pass system that's stigmatizing and makes it very complex and unnecessarily complex for people to be able to have their abortion with pills or to complete their miscarriage with the assistance of abortion pills. So I thank you for laying that all out and also highlighting that, it continues to be convoluted for these pharmacies. Like, why shouldn't they just be on available right now? Why do they have to go in and make these applications and get on a registry? Why is the Food and Drug Administration turning its back on the experts at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists? I mean, when a person is having a miscarriage, the last thing they need is someone trying to kowtow to the politics of the anti-abortion fascist right, like to get in the way of what they need. So anyway, I will stop opining, but I'm just pissed. Next up is, so I want to ask, and we're getting some questions about the Texas lawsuit, and I want to be clear, like, with folks on the line, and I'm going to just say a little bit first before digging into the question. But the Texas lawsuit is not specifically about abortion pills at pharmacies. Like, that ship has sailed. The Food and Drug Administration has said that pharmacies can now dispense these drugs, albeit with some unnecessary restrictions that Ushma just laid out. But that's coming. Like, that's not what it is. There is a lawsuit right now that has been brought by a right-wing front group that has a more innocent sounding name than the group that's actually doing this, which is the Alliance Defending Freedom, a dark money hate group. And this lawsuit is arguing that the Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone was invalid. Now, that approval happened more than 2 decades ago. And there's been this more than 20-year track record of mifepristone being available in the United States, and they're saying, wait a minute, let's turn back the clock and say that shouldn't happen. So this lawsuit, and then I just want to, to add worse to the pile, this lawsuit was filed strategically in Texas in order to put it in front of a Trump-appointed judge. To be very clear, although I think all of our listeners know, Trump appointed judges intentionally who would overturn Roe v. Wade or otherwise attack abortion rights, human rights, individual freedoms, and the institutions of democracy, including science-based decision-making at institutions like the Food and Drug Administration. So a decision could come on this case as early as this week. And this lawsuit is alleging like it was invalid that the FDA approved the use of mifepristone in the United States. And while I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to pretend to be, I'm not going to walk down the wide range of possible legal outcomes. I do think it would be really helpful for you, Ushma, for our audience to tell them about like what are the potential real world impacts and consequences from this lawsuit brought by the anti-abortion groups that are just trying to make it as if the FDA never approved mifepristone.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. This lawsuit has me very worried. And when I talk about it with people who are not in the field, they're like, no, that's impossible. It's never been done. But, they said the same thing about overturning Roe and the Dobbs decision. This organization brought this lawsuit in a jurisdiction where they knew this judge would be sitting, and this judge has a very long history of ruling in favor of conservative values. And so he is expected to rule in favor of this group, this conservative group. And, the question is, how bad is it going to be? If he has the ability to revoke or, to make the FDA revoke the approval of mifepristone. And that could mean that instantly, overnight, abortion pills or mifepristone can no longer be offered by abortion clinics. And this is just horrifying for people who are traveling hundreds of miles to get to a clinic just to get the pill. And we know that a lot of patients want abortion pills. They don't want a procedure, and having that choice is critical to getting the care they want. So providers are right now, I was speaking to a lawyer at the I was speaking to a lawyer, and they said that they are right now counseling their clients to switch protocols, to have a plan in place to offer potentially misoprostol alone. Misoprostol alone, we know is, there's lots of evidence. It's been used throughout Latin America and other countries for years to end pregnancy. We know it to be slightly less effective, but still effective the vast majority of the time. It is also may cause more side effects than mifepristone and misoprostol, and it might extend out the process of expelling the contents of the uterus. And so, I think that the biggest worries are for people who are traveling long distances, and what does this mean for them, having to drive back, is it going to prevent people from getting even more so? Is it even more so going to prevent people from getting this care? And the other thing is that it's going to affect people in all the states, not just the Republican states or the red states. It's going to remove mifepristone from all of the states, even those that are abortion supportive states. So it's so hard to fathom at what this is going to look like. And I wonder if Meg at Just the Pill, if you've been thinking about this, and if you have been getting putting a plan into place for your patients.
Yeah, I was sitting here being like, oh, this is going to turn into a question for me.
Sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yes, of course. And I've been in, a number of meetings all week about what it is that we will have to do to pivot, because it's not just about having access to more misoprostol, for example. It's also about retooling our consent forms and our, instructions for patients. And of course, all of the clinicians need to kind of prepare for how to pivot on their end. So yeah, I'm really proud and pleased to be able to say with confidence our services will not be interrupted, and it won't be without cost by any means. And I think that, from where I sit in Kentucky, where we experienced abortion bans before the Dobbs decision closed, sort of caused our trigger ban to go in effect and close our clinics. I won't say for good, but in a more long-term way for right now, that dealing with these kinds of the impacts of these kinds of restrictions that may not feel like much of a drop in the bucket for people that are reading the news. The impacts are much greater for both providers and, of course, the patients that have to figure out if they're gonna end up traveling during bleeding and cramping. So the impacts are really great, even if we are able to say, we will absolutely make sure that our patients can still have abortion, safe and supported abortions with pills.
I think the hardest thing about it is that there's a reason that the standard of care currently is mifepristone and misoprostol. Clinicians feel the most comfortable with it. It is the standard of care, and it just should not, the medications, even though misoprostol alone will work the majority of the time, clinicians shouldn't be directed about what treatments to give their patients, right? It should be up to the clinician and the healthcare providers, and not a random judge in one jurisdiction in Texas. I think that's the infuriating part. And there isn't as much evidence on the protocols. I think a lot of providers are scrambling. There is a small group of researchers and clinicians, including myself, who are working on putting together a protocol and trying to get that published as soon as possible to offer evidence-based guidance to clinicians for, and also outlining different options depending on the patient's specific situation, if they're traveling from a banned state or not, whether they have access to additional care or not. So there's so much to think about, and we're just in uncharted territory here.
Exactly. And I think that, thank you for that labor, because it's so needed. Of course, we know misoprostol alone works, and we don't want to compromise anything about our patients' experiences, even if it means, a few more days. And a few more days away from home and work and family is a big deal to people, and there's no reason for it, right? Mifepristone is safe. As you said, this is the preferred method, and there's no real reason to restrict this medicine other than to keep us all having to pivot and keep us all, dealing with the stress of whether or not we can provide, the best care that we know our patients deserve. So having to kind of find a new way in these times is absolutely, I think, part of the tactic to continue restricting care and autonomy and freedom, really.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, both to Ushma and to Meg. That was a fascinating conversation. And we're just, what I'm going to do is move along to the next phase and then open it up to questions, because we're getting a lot of questions, as you can imagine, and let's keep this discussion going. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So these Act and Learn webinars happen every month. They're free, they're open to the public. They are designed to both give you the information that you need and you want to learn more about abortion access and all things repro, and also to share strategies and action steps and all those things. We don't want to exclude you from these. We want to invite you to these. The way to always get an invitation is to sign up for email alerts at www.reproaction.org. We email them out to everyone. So you're also welcome to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are ReproAction there. Please keep those questions coming in the questions tab. I'm about to get going into those. But also want to share next month's topic. We will be talking about violence and the pro-life movement. Violence is one of the core strategies of this movement that dares to brand itself pro-life. And so we'll be talking all about their violent rhetoric and actions. So please join us on March 20th at noon Eastern for a call to arms, violence, and the pro-life movement. You can jot that in your calendar now. If you sign up for alerts at www.reproaction.org, you will get that email invitation as soon as it is out. Okay, so I'm going to move to the Q&A. First, I'm just going to answer one of the most common questions we always get, and I apologize for not saying this proactively at the beginning. Yes, we are making a recording of this webinar, and we will send out an email in the next day or two that shares a recording of that webinar, and it will also be posted on our website. Yes, you will be able to track this. So let's see here. This is a great question, and let's start this one with Meg. We have somebody who's asked, are these pills still available in states that have made abortion illegal?
Yeah, that's a great question. Both at this moment in time, both mifepristone and misoprostol are available in states that do not have restrictions on medication abortion through providers such as Just the Pill and other abortion clinics that offer telemedicine. It is possible people do find the pills through mail order sites online and receive them in their home states. And there are legal risks to living in this world, particularly depending on somebody's identity and location. So it's a little bit of a murky answer, but it is possible to receive medication, abortion pills in the mail anywhere, really, anywhere that mail can be delivered. Again, somebody can access them through a clinic such as Just the Pill or another medication abortion provider in states that do not restrict that care.
Thank you, Meg. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Ushma?
Yes, in states that have abortion bans or bans on abortion care, patients can also so mifepristone and misoprostol will most likely not be available in pharmacies, and they're not available from clinics or Planned Parenthoods at all in those 13 plus states. They can choose to self-manage their abortions, and aid access right now is probably the best place where patient or people can go. They go to their website, aid access. If they are living in a banned state, it can be mailed to them through aid access. This is a provider in Europe that is, however, people who access aid access pills are opening themselves up to legal risk. So they have to be aware that there are several steps they might want to take in terms of protecting their digital security so that it cannot be detected. So, I think people are going to have to weigh the risks and benefits of the different options.
Thank you for that. And I would like to plug that ReproAction has a ton of resources on our website at reproaction.org/SMA or self-managed abortion that includes fact sheets about with the World Health Organization protocol for self-managed abortion with pills, whether a person is self-managing with the mifepristone and misoprostol combo, or misoprostol alone. We also have a webinar recording on periods, pregnancy, and digital security, where we talked kind of more in depth about what Ushma just raised. And, I also just want to highlight that, absolutely there are legal risks to accessing this medication, but one thing that we hold in our work at Reproaction, and one thing we hold in our work at Reproaction is that everyone deserves access to information about how our bodies work and about how these pills work. And we know that people aren't stupid, and that these pills are not rocket science in terms of how they're used. There's a long track record of people safely and effectively ending their pregnancies with abortion pills in countries where abortion is banned. And it's happening increasingly here in the US. And the bottom line is this, is that no matter what they do to the laws, abortion is unstoppable, and abortion pills are going to exist no matter how much they try to ban them. And so, definitely want to encourage folks who are in that boat to take steps and precautions to minimize legal risk, and just learn more about steps that can be taken. So thank you so much for that. Okay. Yeah, I'm weighing how to raise this question because it's a really good one. Let me say this. I don't want to repeat the lies of abortion opponents and what they say about abortion pills, but they say a number of things about them that are just flat out ridiculous lies. And how do we combat, and I'd love to hear from both of the panelists on this one, how do we just combat the blatant lies of abortion opponents and the scaremongering that they're doing about abortion pills?
Yeah, I face it in the research world as well. They'll publish papers that using unscientific methods, and just, it's like blatant that they are using methods that don't make any scientific sense to just get to a finding that is just not it just is infuriating, because their papers do get published in the scientific literature, not as many as the actual scientists. But what I usually do, and I'm probably Reproaction has the best advice on this, is I try to stick to the evidence and the science and the data to fight these battles. And so it's so important that we have accurate information in this discourse. And that is the small role that I see myself having, is just making sure that the data are available for advocates, for people who are on the front lines, for litigators, to make sure that these discussions are based on facts.
Thank you so much. Meg, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, excuse me. I'll just kind of echo from my my sort of on the ground perspective, as somebody who heard the most absurd rhetoric for over 20 years straight from the mouths of the protesters on our sidewalk here in Kentucky, that not feeding the bears, and Erin, I love that you were like, I'm not even gonna repeat the rhetoric, right? Is for me kind of just how I mean, of course, and again, shout out to Reproaction for having those resources, those places that we can go, that somebody like myself can go and grab a link and know that I can drop that resource in whatever comment thread or email reply, and say, look, here's where you can find more information on this. I'm not going to engage in a debate about something that is not worth my time right now. Thank you. So yeah, just don't, that's my approach, is do the best to ignore this sort of distraction, and pivot by offering you know, that reliable information that we know is well researched and put together specifically for people to be able to understand this very messy approach that is the attacks on bodily autonomy that we're under.
Yeah, I mean, I will also add a few things on this as well. I can't resist. That, yes, and thank you for shouting that out, Meg. Like, we shouldn't repeat them, because the number of things I could sit down right now and I could start spouting off the most ridiculous things that I've heard them say about abortion pills that are safe and effective, right? These are safe and effective abortion pills, and they're making up stuff that is so wacky. It's like bigger than the Twilight Zone in terms of what they're doing. And they're just sticking things at the wall and to see if they stick. When we repeat them, what happens is that introduces the idea for some people. Like, I could probably share some things they're saying now that you haven't heard before, but then that introduces the idea. So we don't need to be doing that. So message discipline is really important. I think another piece is just to point out that what their agenda is. This is really pivotal core part of the push for white Christian nationalism in this country. And abortion opponents are terrified of abortion pills because they know they can't stop them. Like, you literally cannot make pills go away. No matter what they do to the laws, these pills are not going away. And that's what's happened in countries where abortion has been completely banned, that these pills don't go away. So they're very afraid of them, and they're trying very hard to combat them. One thing that I will say is, Meg, I know that you have lots of up close and personal, as you mentioned, like up close and personal engagement with anti-abortion harassers and protesters and violence propagators. And, to this original topic that we have for our webinar today on abortion pills and pharmacies, like, I really encourage everyone to do what Jackie was saying, share the graphics, sign our petition. It's really important that the pharmacies know that people in their communities want them to stock these important drugs. Abortion opponents are now saying they're going to go protest outside of pharmacies. Like, this is not a good look for them. Those of us who've done clinic escorting and clinic defense know what abortion clinic or what anti-abortion protesters are like. Trust me, as a mom, as a human in the world, like, nobody wants to have to deal with those folks when they're just trying to buy some toothpaste. So I think it's going to be hard for them in coming days with their protests. So this is another great question. So can we talk a little more about the effectiveness of taking misoprostol alone? Because it is a regimen that exists and is used quite a bit, especially in self-managed currently. If we could talk some more about that. So I'll push that back to Ushma.
Sure. So the way it works currently, the protocol that is, I believe, that is most common is using misoprostol buccally or sublingually under the tongue. Taking the first dose and then another dose 3 hours later, and then a third dose 3 hours later after that. And so it is a longer stretch of taking these medications. Some patients actually need a fourth dose, a smaller proportion. And in research or internationally, there have been some studies that show that some people need a fifth dose for the medications to work. The issue is that a lot of the clinical trials that are done, they stop, once a patient is having problems after the third dose, they'll say, okay, come in and we'll treat you in these clinical trials, right? But that is not practical in the case of self-managed abortion, or in the case of a patient traveling from, 8 hours, 10 hours away. And so we don't have enough information on, up to, 5 doses. Is that there isn't a lot of evidence base for up to 5 doses. So some patients will need more of these medications to get the cramping going. The way it works is that it causes the uterus to contract and empty. And so many providers after a certain point are just much more comfortable saying, come in so we can use a suction procedure to evacuate the uterus and, under medical care, clinical care. So I think that's the issue that, we're still learning. There are a couple of clinics that do offer misoprostol alone right now. CaraFem is one of them. And what we're doing is they're also part of these guidelines development process. And so we will bring the experience, the real world experience, because that's really what we need. Sometimes the clinical trials don't tell us the vital information we need, and we need to learn from people on the ground who are using these methods what has worked best. And we do have several people in this group who are developing the guidelines from Latin America who have been using misoprostol alone for decades and guiding patients through the process. So we're really hoping that it is a diverse group of people providing input with real world experience, because that seems to be the most valuable in this moment.
Thank you so much for that, Ushma. Okay, I'm going to answer one question very quickly, and then I'm going to give another question to Meg. This question came in, and it's an important one. It was, if a person receives abortion pills from a clinic, is it still considered a self-managed abortion versus someone who gets those pills online via mail? So I want to be very clear, because it's important to say that abortion with pills, with self-managed abortion and using the World Health Organization protocol, it's the same thing as in terms of the experience and what a person does as abortion that is dispensed by a provider. The difference is it's really a legal question. And so just to directly answer the question, if a person receives a pill from a medical provider, no, that would not be considered self-managed abortion. So the risks that we are talking about are not the same. Meg, I think this is a really interesting question. I'd really like to hear your take on this. So about pharmacies offering a mifepristone in the future, is that going to impact reproductive healthcare clinics' revenue and patients? Like, is that something that folks should be concerned about?
I'm not sure who would be concerned about that. I think, and it just the pill, our belief about this is that abortion pills belong in every single community, whether that is at a clinic or at your neighborhood pharmacy. And obviously there are way more neighborhood pharmacies than there are abortion clinics. So I don't think that, first of all, to be completely honest, abortion pills are very inexpensive, which is why it's pretty easy for people to find and buy them on the internet. But the care that people receive from a clinic includes all manner of conversation about health history, risk of ectopics. We support our patients sometimes in getting an ultrasound that is paid for and covered before they travel. And we've also supported people for whom the pills don't work for. We do provide extra misoprostol in case people need to take more, sometimes a week after they've already seen the clinician. So that's where the cost of care at a clinic like Just the Pill comes in, is they're not paying us for the pills, they're paying us for the care and the wraparound support that they're receiving. And it's still pretty low cost for us, just to kind of put that on a scale. And all of our patients are offered financial assistance, but the full cost of medication is $350 max. That includes the pharmacy fee. So there's a lot that goes into it, but to kind of get to the bottom of the question, I don't think anybody should be concerned about revenue at clinics or this expansion sort of harming our clinics, this is a good thing. And I think that if clinics are telling you that this might harm their bottom line, they might be after your money.
Thank you for that. All right, we are at close. I want to thank Meg. I want to thank Ushma. Just a really both inspiring and educating talk from both of you. And a special tip of the hat to Jacqueline on Repro Action Team for pulling together this amazing webinar. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you next month to talk about the violence of the anti-abortion movement. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.